I'm delighted to be joined by Howard Lutnick. He's the chair and CEO of Cantor. So great to have you here. Thank you for joining us here in Davos.
Great to be here on a snowy evening.
Yeah, it is snowy and cold. So give us a sense, you're here under two auspices, I understand it, both real estate and financial services. Start with financial services, and I'll ask you the tough question that's circulating around here, debt ceiling, because we're walking up to a precipice here. How worried should we be?
The political infighting is just going to begin. It's going to be the same raucous nonsense. They're going to push it to the brink. Lots for you to talk about. But in the end, just remember, we own the printing press for our own money. We can't default. It's just made for TV, made for you. But it's not really a default. It's just political infighting.
So what are the financial services issues that you're discussing here in Davos?
Well, recession and inflation. Okay, inflation is here to stay. What happens is 14 years ago when Lehman, the 08 crisis, interest rates went to zero. So everybody 40 years old and younger, they only know low interest rates. So they all think, oh, at the end of the year, they're going to cut interest rates, and next year they're going to cut interest rates. I just don't see it. The price of milk is higher. The price of everything is higher. And I think inflation stays. I think the 2% that the Fed is looking for is really just imaginary. And I think inflation stays much longer than people think. And we hit a light recession in America.
So what does that do for the mood, as it were, of global Wall Street as it convenes here? One of the things that strikes me is if you're going to have higher rates for an extended period of time, that does something to the discount rate on future cash flow. That makes equities a little less attractive.
So equities, unfortunately, probably going to be boring, kind of floating sideways all year. Banks get to make money, right? Because all the deposits that they had for all those years for us, they made nothing. Now they make money, so banks do okay. But the economy is going to be weak, but not a black swan kind of stuff. There's nothing out in the horizon. It's a nice night. All right, it's a little weak, but you know what? It's a little weak. So what? It's nothing bad is happening in the world. Obviously, Ukraine, and they're bad places. But generally speaking, the U.S. and Europe, weak, but not terrible.
When you talk about higher rates, come back to the debt ceiling for a second, because the Republicans who are threatening to really do something about that are saying we got to spend less money. And they may not be wrong about that. We're borrowing a lot of money as a country. It's okay to borrow when you're at 0% or 0.5% interest rates. If you've got real rates, that really does something to the cost of carrying that debt for the United States government.
I mean, talk about our debt numbers, right? At zero, it was entertaining. But then we spent $9 trillion over the last couple of years, and now we got to pay 5% on it for the rest, pretty much for the rest of our lives. So, because we're never going to get back to zero. Imagine if I said to you a year ago or 2 years ago, or about 20 years ago, we're going to have a $30 trillion deficit, and it's going to be free. You just borrow $30 trillion for free. So 5% interest rates really for a long time to come, and that's going to run up our debt in a big way. Is that inflationary? Of course it is. Of course it is.
At the same time, if we do have a recession, which some people think we may have a recession, we don't have a lot of fiscal headroom, given what you just described, to come in and help. Typically, what happens when you have a recession is the government starts to spend more money to bring it out. I'm not sure we got that leeway. Hands
in their pockets. The problem is if you've got inflation out there, the Fed cannot cut rates into inflation, can't have stimulus into inflation. It's a mistake. It's just a mistake. So what'll happen is they won't be able to do anything, and we'll suffer through a light recession. It's not the end of the world. It's not perfect, but it's not terrible. I mean, it's not a black swan event. Nothing horrible is happening. But the Fed's got no bullets. If you look at your gun and you got nothing left, what are you going to do? Cross your arms.
Howard, let's talk about the other hat you're wearing here, which is real estate, because you're really involved in real estate. You know a lot about it. As we look around the country, certainly New York, but around the country, a lot of concern about affordable housing. There's a shortage of affordable housing. Big political issue. What's to be done about it?
All right. So, I'm the chairman of Newmark, a really large commercial real estate services company. And what we're seeing is really beautiful buildings, new buildings, beautiful buildings. Rents never been higher. Never been higher. Because if you're in a big new glass building, people, they want to go there, so their employees want to come back. Okay, now let's step down. Then let's take another step down. This sort of lousy mid-block building that nobody's going there. Nobody. So that's like a C building or a low B building. They're going to be dark. And that becomes the opportunity. to turn those buildings into low-income housing, right? But you're going to need what?
Money.
Right? These buildings are not built with plumbing. You need to put in plumbing for bathrooms, right? All these buildings are not built that way. But if you remember New York, they turned all those industrial buildings into lofts. We're now all happy to talk about lofts. Lofts came from when the 50s, when they all sort of stopped out of cities, and then they turned them into loft buildings. So that's what's going to happen. But here's the tough part. You've got local governments who want green. They want to turn brown to green, right? But that costs money. And you want low-income housing, and you don't want to spend a lot of money on low-income housing. You got real stress and pressure. And you're going to need a turnover of local government to try to go build low-income housing in these cities. And it's going to work. It's not soon, but I think in 5 years, that'll be like a big push. Turn all these dark, mediocre office buildings into low-income housing.
Let me ask you a different question about the practical consequences of this. You have these buildings that are C buildings, office buildings. They're not empty. It's not zero tenants. You've got some tenants in there. How long does it take to get the tenants out so you can make the conversion?
Yeah, in the next 3 to 5 years, people are not going to want to be in those buildings. Everybody's going to want to trade up because your employees, they want more from you. Like right now, my offices are totally under construction. And we're going to build, and I'm spending more money than I ever would have spent because I want the offices to be beautiful so my employees are happy and excited to come back to work. Because I need to draw them back like with a magnet, right? And so I think those C buildings, next 3 to 5 years, they're going to suffer. The mortgages will come due and they're not going to be refinanced. The lenders are going to own them. Then the game's on.
So briefly here at the end, this is Bloomberg. Make some money for us. What's the investment opportunity which you described?
Okay, so everybody who bought real estate over the last 10 years, okay, they bought it at like a 5% yield, and now yields are 7. Okay, so they're hurting, but the opportunity is coming. The next 18 months, there's going to be distressed or opportunistic real estate. You're going to see more money come into real estate to buy it at the right price, because we both know, when do you make money? On the way in at the right price. It's not when you sell it, it's when did you buy it. And that opportunity is coming fast and furiously. As real estate resets, you're going to see more money come into opportunistic and distressed real estate than you ever can imagine.
That's Howard Lutnick warming up a very cool evening here in Davos. Thank you so much. He is the chair as well as CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald.